All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to see you today. If you are here for our live Q&A with Chris Campbell of the Oklahoma State Foundation, you are in the right place. I see we have lots of folks coming in now. I like to give everybody just a minute or two, to transition in. So I'm going to run through, a couple additional resources, things that you can tap into as we all figure out this work from home, this fully remote work environment, but also like what can we do to move our shops forward now? Like how can we lay the groundwork for success as we move forward? And so, stay tuned. We are going to get started shortly. I see a lot of folks signing in. That number keeps ticking up. I want to make sure actually you can hear me. So I know we're all getting used to Zoom right now. So here is, if you're new to Zoom, there's a black toolbar, and there's a chat feature there. There's a Q&A feature. You use the Q&A, send in your questions, or when you're looking at that, use the chat and let me know that you can hear me, and let me know where you're calling from today. Where are you dialing in from, and what organization are you with? So go ahead and start filling that up. Let's see who's on the call today. We got Bentley University, the team there. Excited to have you. Ripon College, NYU, New York, we're thinking of you. Eugene, Oregon. OU, that's awesome. Georgia Tech, I was just on your campus, absolutely gorgeous. Our middle son was visiting, and just a wonderful group of people. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Jeannie from Salem State, Louisiana Tech, good to see you. Ursuline Academy in Dedham, University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, hello. Thank you for doing your work on the front lines there. UNC Charlotte, Brett, good to see you. Dayton, Ohio, Wheaton College, Mass, Austin, Sherman, DePaul University, excellent. You all are here because we've been pushing out tons of resources for fundraising during the COVID-19 crisis. If you haven't checked out evertrue.com/remote, go there, subscribe. We're going to keep pushing out guides and updates and just information that's helpful for all of us in advancement. And this is going to turn into another edition. Hey folks, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I am back. I see Chris is there as well. Can everybody hear me? I'm going to ask again in the chat. Folks, raise their hand. Okay, good. You can hear me. Excellent. Sorry about that. I'm having some technical difficulties, but we also wanted to do a little scientific poll today to see, have you had little technical difficulties at work? So in this new environment, have you had to adjust to having noisy kids in your new work from home environment? And Brent has some of his sons there today. Brent, who was joining you earlier?
That was my man Odin and Soren. And yes, Mike, I'm going to reply to the poll. I have had to adjust to noisy kids in my work environment.
Chris, what about you?
Yeah, not terribly bad. I'm kind of up here in the corner of our house, and fortunately right now is nap time too, so I think we're in good shape.
You just got to speak in whispers during nap time.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you I'm sorry you had to miss your nap time for our conversation today, but thank you.
Mine's in the morning, so it works out really well for me.
Excellent. So Dan from Tennessee, Mindy from Illinois, awesome to see y'all. April, two kids have joined. My kids have joined every meeting I've had in the last 2 weeks. That's awesome. Glad to hear it. Looks like it's a split about 50-50. You have new office mates. That's awesome. This is all the new normal for us. And so I'm just going to turn it over now to Brent and Chris to just run the discussion. I'm going to be handling the chat and the Q&A, so send those questions in. And Brent, I'm going to turn it over to you now to introduce Chris.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. And Chris, it's great to see you as always. Thank you for making time. And this is a part of a series that many of you have I think, been fortunate to join. If this is your first session that you're catching. The rest are on our website. We've had some very good discussions so far. And this one is one that I've been looking forward to. I've known Chris for a long time, and just getting a window into the role that information technology, information strategy has had to play. We've probably seen more change as it relates to how we're working in the last 10, 20 days as we've seen in the last 5 or 10 years. And Chris has been on the forefront of that. He has worked as a frontline fundraiser. He's got some athletics background. He has worked in major gifts. He is now leading information strategy. So one of the few people I've met on my journey here that has gone from the front line to leading information strategy, but that always gives Chris great empathy and perspective for the needs of end users, because he was one of those people at one time. And so Chris, welcome. Really glad to have you today.
Thanks for having me, Brent. It's always good to talk with you guys, and thanks for thinking of Oklahoma State too when you guys are doing these great webinars and sessions.
Absolutely. So we are, just in case anybody's catching a recording, it's April 1st, no joke, and we are now sort of adapting to this new reality. I feel like last week was so much just of kind of getting adjusted. This week is a little bit more getting back to work, at least in a certain regard. Depending on where you're at, you might feel differently, but that's kind of how it feels like from my perspective. And I'm curious kind of what's top of mind for you, Chris, how you would describe the last 10 days, 2 weeks or so, and how you feel your organization is adapting overall.
Very similar to what you're saying. We are lucky in quite a few ways. We had made kind of a digital shift over the last couple of years. And so we added onto our building about 2 years ago at the foundation. We added a whole bunch of great collaboration spaces for our staff. We made the decision at that time to give everybody laptops at the organization. About that time, 40 or 50% of our staff had desktops. It's really hard to be collaborative in today's world if you're trying to lug a CPU into a conference room. So literally everybody, we have about 160 people at the foundation, all but I think 3 have laptops. We were able to get those 3 people laptops from kind of our stock.
Mike, I don't know if there's a way, but like that's one of those things that I would never even think of, is what percentage of our employees have laptops. And, that's one of those things where as a tech company, we've never issued anything other than a laptop to anyone. Mm-hmm. But I am really curious to know what the mix is, even among our attendees today. How many people, and I imagine, Chris, you have peers where they hadn't issued everybody laptops. So is that part of the rapid response that's been happening the last couple of weeks across the sector?
I think so. I mean, I think you've got shops and unfortunately scrambling, and it's probably, I've had a conversation because some of us have laptops, and I'm lucky I've got kind of the dual monitor set up here at my house. I work remotely once or twice a month outside of something like this. But I encourage some of my staff that were wanting to go out and buy monitors for themselves to do it quick, because I think you're seeing a lot of shops having to react in that way.
Interesting. And in addition to the laptop context, you had also made some moves to support team collaboration and communication well in advance of this situation.
Yeah, we are so we're a Microsoft shop. A lot of people, let's say more traditional, that don't use Google, use Microsoft Office. And about 18 months ago, we started pushing out Microsoft Teams, which is kind of their, version of Slack.
Yep.
And it was a little tough at the front because, one of the things, you're talking about everybody at EverTrue has laptops. You wouldn't think otherwise. One of the things I probably struggle with here is we're definitely not a technology company. So we have some people that aren't as comfortable with technology, but we pushed Microsoft Teams pretty heavily the last 18 months. And I would say in the last year or so, it's been heavily, heavily adopted. And so the function of doing our work, going from away from our building to remote, for the most part, has been relatively smooth. We just literally had at 1 o'clock today our first ever kind of all hands digital meeting. We've got a president that's been here 17 years. He's a month or so from retirement. And then his incoming president kind of co-hosted the first ever, we had 140 people on the call. It went really well. We've never had 140 people at our org-wide team meetings when they're on site. So it's been really exciting to see that.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be one of the interesting examples where this has been such a forcing function for change. I mean, there's no reason, Chris, that you weren't doing those meetings like that 2 months ago, right?
1,000%. And there's no reason we shouldn't keep doing it, right? We have staff across the country. We've got fully remote staff. We've got people in Texas and New York. And so people are kind of craving this interaction anyways. We're all probably reading the same blogs right now, but there, I think, will be some really exciting outcomes from this when we get through it, and seeing these things be sticky, right? That ways we can interact with not just ourselves internally, but our constituents and our prospects as well.
Yeah, good stuff. So we're just seeing the results of the poll, but it looks like, there was definitely, it's interesting to see the group that's more 50, 40, 30% where there weren't many. That's interesting. And so you were relatively well equipped. People had devices. They already had teams. I'm sure you've seen an explosion in adoption. I'm guessing there were some holdouts that just never really got on board with that new chat thing, that all of a sudden you're probably at about 100% adoption or 80%. I mean, not asking for exact metrics, but I'm sure you've seen just a wave of growth.
Just before this, I had one of our teammates in kind of our help desk area. He took a screenshot. It's one of the admin panels from Office 365, and it's the growth in our users and the growth in activity in Teams in the chat, and it's off the charts. I should have printed it off before this, but it was, up 500%, week to week over the last 2 or 3 weeks, because we're going into our 3rd week here of being fully remote at the foundation. So it's and even some of the folks that we would say are a little late adopters. One of our teams in particular, I won't name any names, but they had to become early adopters because their leader a year and a half ago moved to another state and was working fully remote. And so it's really spread, and we're seeing that growth happen even more frequently. So
thanks for sharing. I mean, in addition to the internal enablement, if you will, ensuring that people have the hardware and software that they need and that they're trained, and obviously things like the current president and and the incoming doing joint conversations can be a real forcing function to get adoption. I'm curious now, it sounds like that was really for internal staff. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that kind of work for external stakeholders yet? Or when you think about virtual engagement activities, anything like that, have you already seen any success, or do you anticipate trying to have community conversations in a similar manner?
Yeah, I think we're doing that, from a university at large. Burns Hargis is our university president, very charismatic. Before he was our university president for the last 12 years, he was on the weekly Sunday morning, political talk show Crossfire, on the NBC affiliate. So he's very comfortable behind a camera and talking with people. So we're starting to see that come out. We're definitely pushing virtual visits with our development officers. I mean, we want to be very, very respectful of the time we're in right now, particularly for our donors and our constituents. But one of our colleagues say on the call earlier that, like many of our universities and many of the institutions online here, we are like a family. And what do you do in times of crisis? You don't disconnect, you stay connected, right? And so doing it appropriately, doing it in a way that is respectful of the place that people are at, is as critical, if not more so now. And so we launched, and a big part of this was led by Blair Atkinson, our incoming foundation president. She's currently the OSU Alumni Association president. A cowboy.family website, you shared it in a post. And that really was a very quick kind of amalgamation of all these things we kind of started working on and talking about. A lot of it was already being led by the OSU Alumni Association and Chase Carter over there, who's just a rock star. But bringing those things all together on one site can help us stay connected, but also inform the people that are engaged with OSU was really important.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop that into the group chat here for everyone. And Mike, if possible, I don't know if you could toggle over to that site, but I think it's one of those things that really does warrant attention. I said everyone should copy and steal this. I just put it into the chat. But I absolutely love this. Mike, if you can flip to that, it'd be great. Otherwise, people can catch it in the chat.
Yeah. We've gotten great feedback from that. So we're a separate 501c3. The foundation is from the OSU Alumni Association, but we have a great partnership. Incidentally, their current president was on our leadership team before she became president of the Alumni Association, and she's now going to be our president starting in about a month or so. So great awareness and collaboration. She partnered immediately, obviously, with her team there, but also we have another rock star at the foundation. Her name's Amanda Davis. She leads our annual giving team here. And Amanda just really understands the role of certainly annual giving, but also the partnership with engaging our constituents across the spectrum here. And just literally, I actually talked to Blair for probably 20 minutes yesterday, kind of trying to get some background. They had a call, I think, maybe a week and a half ago, really the three of them. And within about, on the call, Chase Carter had pulled together kind of the mock-up of the website through their iModules platform. And really within a couple of days had really had the thing built out the way it needed to be and just push it out. So it speaks to where we are kind of in a technology front in the world. But Brent, you always talk about our ability to adopt kind of these for-profit tactics in our not-for-profit world. And it's exciting to see that launch and happen as quickly as it did.
Yeah, no, it's impressive. I think Mike's been having some internet issues, but he'll jump back in here, and maybe he just did. Looks like everybody is still on. We have had a couple of questions pop in, so I want to make sure that we can get to those as well. This is an interesting question here, Mike, that just came in via Mike. Somebody said, what role has your College of Business played in messaging the economic challenges for alumni who happen to be small business owners? Any virtual chats with faculty? And it may be, again, premature, but would be curious to get your take on that.
Yeah, I am a Spear School of Business alum, so I get some of their communication. So I'm starting to see that myself as the constituent. Ken Eastman is the dean there. He's been at OSU for, I think, probably 2 decades. He's connecting with our alums to share, video messages of encouragement. And so he's pushing that out through kind of their communication channels. If you scroll down there, I think there is and I saw it earlier, it may be midway, actually it's at the top, kind of in the middle, just below. It's, write a note. You can write a note to a student.
I love it.
Not limited to just the business school, but, I think, clearly we're here to serve, at least the foundation is here to serve the university and the students. And, we all will go through things like, now this is a little bit unprecedented what we're going through right now, but, we had the financial recession in the 08 and 09. And so we've learned from that. It's things we can share with our students and the kids that are coming out into the working world now is what they're doing.
And I think this is another example, Chris, where maybe this crisis was a forcing function to develop this kind of resource hub, this cowboy.family. But like, we should probably just have this kind of thing.
Yeah.
You really, like, if I want to engage with this institution, I absolutely can donate, but I can write a note. I can recommend a student. What a good idea, right? Everyone is trying to figure out how do we maintain our revenue, whether it's tuition, whether it's student retention, whether it's advancement. And you've got a little bit of everything here without kind of it being just, just about a gift, right? I mean, there is more holistic opportunity for somebody to engage.
Yeah, and it really is about staying engaged and connected. And I don't want to speak too much for Blair Atkinson, but she understands that this really should be a two-way partnership, right? And particularly with our alums and the people that are engaged with OSU, from an alumni association perspective, an alumni engagement perspective. How are we serving them, even outside of something like this? And a lot of that's career services and some resources there, but this really speaks to, I think, her vision of, just being a hub for this kind of information. I mean, we link to I think the CDC here. I mean, it's really just kind of a one-stop shop, and it's not all just about OSU. And I think it's kind of down towards the bottom, but there's a piece here where there's an opportunity for people that are interested and willing to make a gift. And we're lucky is definitely not the right word, but, we're in Tornado Alley here, and, Moore, Oklahoma, every 3 to 5 years seems to get really hit badly by tornadoes. So the last round 3 or 4 years ago, we deployed the Cowboy Strong Emergency Fund. And it was really a fund that was unrestricted, people could give to. And at that time, it was really to serve these, students that were, their houses had gotten literally blown away in the tornado, that didn't have a place to live. What could we do to help serve them? And so that's a tool we can even use now in this situation, because you've got students, you've got kids that can't pay for, their car payment or their job or their rent. And so lots of opportunities here to serve, and doing it in a way that's, appropriate and respectful of the kind of situation we're in.
And I feel like, given that you've dealt with those sorts of moments before, obviously this is a different scale, but having to sort of balance the engagement with still needing to achieve revenue targets for the foundation. And I'm just curious, you don't got to share specifics, but when you think about striking that tone, and we've had some earlier iterations of this live Q&A where people have said, how do you know how to balance having a conversation about a solicitation versus a more general check-in? But at the same time, once we do all those general check-ins, at some point we have to be able to come back and start to predict what kind of revenue shortfall we might be dealing with either proposals that are in flight that are going to be pushed, or solicitations we feel would just be inappropriate right now. So I'm curious, obviously, from where you sit, part of what you need to help with is being able to ensure there's analytics and forecasting in place so you can answer those questions. So there's kind of the data aspect, but then there's the anecdotes probably that you might be hearing from some of your frontline colleagues.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly equipped. We're a big Tableau shop. We've talked about it over the years, Brent. We understand that. We track that. But, again, right now, still relatively early on, it's really about just supporting our constituents and our alums and certainly our donors. The reason that this is such a great line of work or business to work in is it takes really smart, talented people to be our fundraisers. And you have to have those one-on-one conversations and know where those all are at, right? And it really takes a savvy touch to really know when to have that conversation, right? I mean, there's people now that we're hearing that want to come in and support the Cowboy Strong Fund that, we wouldn't have necessarily gone out and asked. We've got to make sure there's an opportunity there for them to do that with being respectful. But we've got an industry full of really savvy fundraising professionals. And, obviously I'm a little biased here, but this is a business where the relationship truly is important. And this is where those understanding the relationship with your individual donors and constituents will be critical to knowing when that time is, right? Because it's going to be different for every donor, every prospect. There may be some out there that are heavily invested in Zoom that maybe now is a really great time to go out and ask for a gift. But, ultimately it comes down to those individual conversations. And then obviously as a leadership team preparing for what that might look like down the road.
So can you talk a little bit about your view of the role that advancement services needs to play? There is some, very tactical work that probably had to adjust to this work from home component. And then there's some more strategic work, some of which we've already touched about. What role do you think advancement services, prospect development should be playing in a situation like this?
Yeah, you all are familiar with Jacob Astley. He's a huge fan of EverTrue and has done a lot of webinars. He's right now his team is just reaching out. He oversees our prospect development team. They're just reaching out to our development officers and asking, what do they need, right? What can we help you with? I made a joke to Mike Nagel the other day about came home from the weekend this Monday and was kind of asking everybody, how was it? What'd you guys do? And, knowing that everybody's pretty much on lockdown right now, and everybody's like, well, we spent a ton of time in the yard working on the yard. So I think everybody's gonna have great yards this spring and this summer, right? Because there's not a lot else to do. And I think when I think of advancement services, it's a little bit around that theme of, well, we've got an opportunity here. Put all your contact reports in, as your development officer, and I'll get on my soapbox here for a second. There's great opportunities to go through your phone, because I did this as development officer. I had the new cell phone for everybody that I needed to know, but I never shared that back with records management, right? And so there's lots of great, and I know there's somewhat tactical things, but you think a couple months from now, hopefully the vision is that our systems, our contact reports, our databases would be as clean as they ever have been, because we may have a little bit more time to focus in on that. And we're serving, from an advancement services, I oversee our IT team. We're certainly serving our internal partners here at the organization, but we had a conversation about virtual visits. We just kind of greenlit as a development leadership team. Our virtual visits now count as personal visits. And I think that's something arguably that we could keep, when we're all back to normal as well. So we've got a great training team in HR that used to be part of our team here in IT, and her name is Bonnie Stout, and she developed just a little one-sheeter for our constituents, because our development officers need to be able to give them something to say, here's how you do a Teams meeting. And so there's this little PDF that Bonnie developed, and she can send that to the development officers, and they can in turn send that to a donor so that they feel comfortable getting on and logging on and setting up and doing a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. So a lot of this it's interesting. Our shift historically certainly has been mostly internal, but some of it I think will be external as we're helping some of our partners, even outside the bounds of the foundation, get used to this.
Well, we did have a webinar yesterday with Julie Craig up at K-State, and she shared that, on the webinar we did a survey, and more than 50% of people who responded said that they've adopted virtual visits in the last 2 weeks, similar to what you're describing. And I do think that's another example of something that we probably could have done 2 months ago. We've now done it. Are we ever going to undo it? Probably not, I think.
Yeah,
and so then there'll be a whole other question of, well, what's our strategy? What mix do we want? But we won't be questioning, should we do virtual visits or not? It's just going to be the new way of doing work. And I guess when you think about, there was one really quick question. How long did it take to create that website, cowboy.family? Or was it works prior to COVID?
Generally speaking, when I get asked any of those questions, I always say it takes way longer, so people will feel sympathetic for those of us in operations. But literally, I was talking to Blair. She said on the call, Chase Carter had kind of mocked up the rough draft, bought the domain name in 15 minutes, I think is what he did first, and then mocked it up. And I think within probably 3 to 5 days, it was done. I mean,
because really all the content existed.
Yeah.
It just hadn't been organized in that sort of manner.
You had to create kind of a message that kind of made it all, bring it all together. But ultimately those resources were out there. It's, not to oversimplify, but it's just about bringing the hyperlinks together for the most part.
Well, let's go back to your comment about everybody's going to have great yards this spring because we're all at home. I think we're going to have great yards and probably not great haircuts is my guess. But when you think about the audit, the checklist of just the basic blocking, and really, if your yard doesn't look great this spring, you don't have much of an excuse. Fair? So if your data set, if your systems aren't clean come, June 1st, let's call it, probably a missed opportunity. And so, I mean, when we think about it, there's kind of that core underlying contact report, bio, basic work. But then there's things like career data and how do we get better at monitoring that on an ongoing basis. Obviously, we've talked a lot over the years about, now that event engagement is sort of off the table. How do we ensure that we've got our digital engagement tracking in place or enhancing it if we can? We're seeing lots of institutions embrace technologies like ThankView to do some video stewardship. We've just, I don't know if we've announced it yet, but we will be announcing a partnership with ThankView to track that video engagement alongside Facebook and some of the other work that we've done. Wondering what you are thinking as far as the yard work. Now, I also want to give Robin a shout out, who says, so not true about the yards. We at DePaul are just as busy as ever. So I respect that, Robin. So, but we're just offering some perspectives here, okay?
Yeah, I think, again, it probably is a missed opportunity. There's lots of great ideas that aren't a lot of work that our teams and partners and organizations, again, in this kind of sense, OSU is a little lucky. We're in the process, we're in the discovery phase of a CRM implementation. And so we kicked that off in July. And so really for the last year or so, we've been doing a lot of these things. So, you know, I won't say it's business as usual for us, but we were really primed for this, and it's really allowed us, you know, we kind of kicked off discovery in early March before all this happened, which was very fortunate. We had a great on-site meeting with all the partners involved in the project. But we were kind of going down this path. But I mean, you know, there's opportunities here to think about do you have a plan for a data warehouse? What are you doing with that? I mean, we have access. There's so many different pools and silos of data across campus. What does that look like for your institution? How are you bringing that in? We've been partnering with our athletic department to help them with some of the data in their ticketing solution. And again, these are things that we were already doing, but you know, this is, you know, I've read a lot of books, and there's always one of the things that talks about leaders is really the opportunity. You should have time in your day just to push back from the desk, put your feet up for 5, 10, 15 minutes and pontificate, right? And I think this is that time for a lot of us. What could we be doing differently or better, knowing that we're going to get this rapid push into different technologies, knowing that our constituents are going to expect different things from us. And so I think a big part of this is just giving yourself and all of us some space to really sit down and think about some things without having to rush from thing to thing. Now I say that, and every time I've had a conversation with someone in the last 2 or 3 days, I've made the comment that it seems busier now than when we were in the office, and everybody seems to agree, but there's opportunities here to pull away a little bit and think differently about some things.
Totally. I am curious with the CRM conversation. Now, you've been going down a path, but when you made your evaluation and selection, it was kind of in the old normal, if you will. And it doesn't mean that you're going to reevaluate, but I guess, is it causing you to reprioritize certain themes, recognizing that we may always be in a little bit more of a remote context? For example, work from home may be more common. Again, it could be too early to even ask that question, but I'm just curious if there are others, you know, if you were kicking off a CRM search now, what would you be thinking about that maybe would not have been? I mean, look, we've had some partners reach out and say, hey, we can't have that many people accessing our database via VPN at the same time. Can you grant us more access to EverTrue so we can just get into the system? And that was like shocking that people literally didn't have enough logins or whatever to I don't know enough about all the details of every system, but if you were now making that evaluation, what would you be considering?
Probably a lot of the same. Now, I will say, if we didn't have EverTrue at the OSU Foundation, I would have gotten a dozen of those requests to get access to our system already. But I don't. That's not happening because, you know, we've deployed EverTrue across essentially all of our fundraising and development officers. But we had an emphasis on mobility and access and some of the things going into this because of the system we've been on it for a while. It was a bit antiquated, and we knew that. But I think, you know, it's still a little bit early. But like I was having a conversation with Jacob Assia today about, you know, we wanted to allow development officers to get credit for personal visits by doing virtual visits now, but I didn't want to take the extra time to say, well, I don't want to rework the system right now. We can talk about that. Now we have something to think about when we go into our prospect development sprint, you know, in August or September, with a frame set and a mindset of our constituents are going to be, we're engaging them differently now, and a lot of that's going to carry through. So are we going to build this system out in a way that is flexible for this scenario or any other scenario, right? It's that kind of conversation of, so the conversation about allowing our development officers to get credit for their personal visits, for those that are done as virtual visits, you know, we made that decision. Then there was a conversation that followed was, well, what about phone calls? I had a really good phone call. Can we count that as a personal visit? And it's like, well, that's a little bit more of a stretch, but ultimately, you know, it's not about the medium. It's about engaging with our constituents and our prospects in a way that is most comfortable for them. For some people, that's a text message nowadays, right? We don't yet have a button for, we've got an email, you know, activity. We don't have an SMS or a text message. So it's really put us in this framework going into this of how can we do this not only with our constituents, but also internally ourselves. And we picked a Salesforce backed solution we're pretty confident in and feel really good about. And I think this continues to emphasize that selection.
Great. Yeah, a couple of people had asked. Mindy asked a good question that is a little bit of a can of worms, but we got to put it out there. I'd really like to get department heads to spend time right now sharing the info they know about alumni. Alumni who come and speak in classes, who are engaged with faculty. How do we get them to share this information while they too are stuck at home in their PJs?
I don't have any, that's one of the best ideas in this, because a lot of this lives with, these faculty, the professors have such great relationships with these students, and they carry on for decades. They are undoubtedly sitting on a trove of great information out there. I think you just have to ask, right? I mean, probably like a lot of us, they may have a little more free time on their hands. Not that everybody's, kicking their feet up and drinking a Mai Tai, but I think at the end of the day, you just have to ask, right? And there's an opportunity here. It's a whole other conversation, but as we get into this world of consent, we've seen California and New York start to pass laws around privacy. There will be a point here where that shadow database that maybe the faculty member is emailing from, right now it's not ideal, but it's, if you're the constituent and you told OSU to take you off the list, it's kind of a nuisance. There will come a point where that may be more than just a nuisance. There may be legal ramifications to that. So encouraging our staff to kind of jump on this bandwagon now, and that's more of the stick approach than the carrot. But I think partnering together in this time so we can make sure we have updated information and we can connect with people. Because ultimately, a lot of this, I think in the near term, the support we're going to get is really going to be directed towards students. So if you could frame this as, here's an opportunity for us to connect with people so they can continue to support and help our students in a time that's unprecedented, may be a great way to frame that.
Yeah, no, I think a related piece to Mindy's question, I mean, it sounds like that's something she's wanted to get at forever, but there's also new types of data being generated. For example, as faculty, as deans, as advisory boards, for example, shift to Zoom conversations or Teams or whatever the medium may be, if we start doing virtual events with our alumni and friends and supporters, one of the questions we've been exploring with many of our partners is there's been such a move just to adopt the new technology and get the medium in place, but then that immediately raises the question of, are we tracking the data?
Yeah.
Right now there are 120 participants on our conversation. We know who everyone is and we're tracking that information, and that all becomes a part of the relationship. And I wonder, how do we ensure that as we're spinning up all these video calls everywhere, that we don't miss the opportunity to understand which alumni are joining and raising their hands and expressing interest? Again, could be too early to ask if you've got a handle on that, but I'm sure it's something that virtual reunions, virtual class campaigns, virtual, you name it, are kicking off. How do we ensure that we get the data about who's engaging?
And the question is, was like Simon Sinek, start with the end in mind, start with why. Whenever someone comes to me and says, we need to track this, we need to build this format, it's absolutely, we can do that. What's the why? What are we going to do with it? And how are we going to keep it? And I think that's a question we have to always, especially now, because there are so many different, data sources out there from, our Alumni Association has a mobile app, and there's great data out there that, is informative for them. And so you just really, it's about asking that question kind of over and over ad nauseum and making sure that you're doing something with it.
Yeah, good stuff. We are going to try to keep this to another, 5-10 minutes, maybe. If there are any final, questions, please ask them in the chat or in the Q&A. Chris, I did want to ask your perspective. I know that the foundation has been through other cycles, right? And I know that there have been some good experiences over the years of engaging donors at a time when we might be afraid or less confident in engaging donors. And so I know you've got at least one story about T. Boone Pickens. If you wouldn't mind me asking, I think it's worth sharing.
We had a tremendous president, Jim Halligan, in the, I think, early 90s to early 2000s. He was here for about 10 years. And at that time, in Oklahoma and a lot of places, we're very used to these kind of cycles, right? Because we're very dependent on the energy and the oil business in particular, which, again, right now, in addition to what's going on with COVID-19, oil's at $21 a barrel. And so, Boone at a couple of different times had lost all of his net worth, right? And was essentially broke. And one of these periods when Dr. Halligan went to visit him in the 90s, went out to Dallas and maybe out to his ranch in Pampa. And, Boone's first kind of comment was, Jim, I don't have anything to give you. I don't know why you're pestering me. And Dr. Halligan, a very smart person, said, hey, Boone, I'm not here because of what you're going to do. I'm here what you've already done. So, clearly that's a story of stewardship and taking the opportunity to thank people for what they've done. We use Thank You here as well. I mean, there are great tools and resources out there just to say thanks. People are right now, I think, looking for stories of grace and appreciation. And if there ever was a time for stewardship and thanking people for all that they've done, I think now is certainly that time.
Fair perspective, and yeah, with the right tone, it's hard to frustrate or upset anybody, and I think we can do a lot of good. There is a question that came in that said, advancement services is often overloaded, and all the yard work you're mentioning for frontline DOs will fall back on us, since where I work, DOs don't have much access to do data entry. They can't provide the updated cell phone numbers directly, for example. Is this a catalyst to change that? I mean, is this the moment? That's an anonymous attendee. I don't know who asked the question, but is this a moment where you start to relax policies or make adjustments to ensure that, because the punchline here is, I was hoping to have catch-up time to go do the yard work, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Now I don't. Yeah. I actually typed, no, I'm kidding. I typed that myself. No. I mean, to me, that's actually a really great example of what we were talking about earlier when I'm thinking about our CRM and our user stories, right? I mean, we're already starting to talk about access, not just to the system, but to make changes in the system. And, every challenge is an opportunity, right? And, we have we've got great teams here in gift management, records management. They're generally a little hesitant to open up those doors a little bit, but when you go through something like this, there's the volume could potentially be there where you don't have the time or the energy to go do what you need to do, and you need help, right? Very similarly, we're a big Tableau shop here, and 3 or 4 years ago, one of the first things I had to do in this role was to encourage us in IT to open up the doors a little bit for teams outside of traditional IT to build reports and have access to some of the back end data. And one of the points that I kind of made was, there is such a voracious appetite for reporting and information. We will probably never have the resources to serve that appetite. So you can either get used to working 90 hours a week, or we can frame this and build this out in a way that will be in partnership with some of these end users with some framework and some things in mind. And I think this question is very similar to that. If we really want to have this data up to date and as accurate as possible, we're going to have to open up that and trust a little bit. You can use this challenge as an opportunity to present some perspective here and use that as a tool to push that needle forward a little bit. I think that's a great question. Great comment.
Yeah, and I would say, based on our conversations with leadership, even the last 2 weeks, there really there is a moment here that if you feel like things aren't being done as efficiently as possible, or that this maybe you've wanted for years for the frontline DOs to be able to suggest updates and make changes, but maybe you can now frame it through the lens of, hey, I want to share some observations based on 2-3 weeks of all of us being fully remote. I think there are 3 or 4 ideas that could really streamline things. It would require some changes to how we do things. Would it be out of the question to consider this? And I feel like leaders are hungry for that kind of observation and suggestion. And if you frame it the right way, I don't think you're going to get your wrist slapped. Now, obviously, every organization is different, but what's your view on that?
That's we'll have a few minutes here, but that's another thing we've been talking about. Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah.
But I work remotely once or twice a month, but it's 1 day at a time usually, right? I've never done this 2, 3. So that first week when I hit day 3 or 4, if I had for us, one of the things that we're a little behind on is our invoice process. It's very manual. Yep. So if on Friday I was working from home, I couldn't get that invoice done, I just do it on Monday. our organization is starting to really see in weeks 2 and 3, these things are like, man, I can't sign that contract and scan it, right? Well, take a photo of it, sign it. We're hitting some of these right now. I think in real time, we're hitting some of these things. So back to that comment of all this extra work that might happen, it may not be that we do and make those changes now, but now we have a different perspective on things that we could do better, even when we're back in the office, right? And I think beginning to build that list out, here's what we could really do to be more efficient. We implemented DocuSign 3 years ago, 2 years ago, our legal team did, for endowment agreements. So kind of an important but relatively small part of our business. Prior to that, it was the bluebacks. It was, multiple copies going to the dean, and that it took 2 to 3 weeks to get that fully executed.
Yeah.
You know how quickly we do it now? Less than 2 days on average, right? And so, there's opportunities.
Great example. Like if you're not DocuSigning gift agreements, this is your moment to be able to do that, right? I think anywhere that you feel friction, and I think that what people don't want right now are complaints, right? We don't have a lot of time for, well, this problem or this doesn't work or this. Now, if you can frame it with, hey, I'm feeling some friction here. What if we considered this? Or I heard about somebody else that did that. I think this is a moment where you're going to see a lot more willingness to entertain new ideas.
Absolutely. So I had an old boss of mine at the foundation several years ago. She always said, it's okay to bring me problems, but at least try and bring me a couple of solutions too.
Yes.
And so it's about using this as an opportunity to get better in areas. And you think about kind of I hate to use the term back office because everybody's the front of the office, but our advancement services team, this is a great opportunity to really shed some light on some things and some opportunities here that maybe many of us knew we needed to get better at anyways, but we just didn't quite have the mechanism or the story to tell to say, hey, there's how this will get better, right? One of the things that I've heard multiple times as I've interacted with people across the organization is, and it's not on me, it's on, Jimmy and his IT team and, David Laws and that crew, but lighting up teams was a really great thing for us 18 months ago, and it has made this process. So, think about what happens if this happens 2 years from now. How can we be even better equipped? And I think there's a great opportunity there.
Love it. Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day, and for all of the folks who joined, thank you so much. We did flash up Chris's information, easy to find on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And please let us know if there's other themes you'd like to have us cover in this Q&A session. It's honestly been a great learning experience for us and hopefully valuable for you. But without further ado, Chris, unless you've got any closing thoughts, we might sign off here.
Just wanted to say thanks, Brent, to you and your team. We've just had such a great partnership with you guys from the start, both ways in this process. And without a doubt, within a day or two, Meggie was emailing us and Mike and you just checking in on us. And it's great to see. That's one thing I love about this industry, this business. There's a lot of great people in altruism, and we'll see it happen here, and it's happening real time. We're going to see more of that in the next couple of weeks and couple of months.
All right, Chris, take care. Thank you so much. My best to the whole team down there. Okay.
Good to see you. I'll see you on Musician.
All right. See you on Musician. Bye-bye.